"What a beautiful wedding your sister had. She found a wonderful husband." My mother sighed, settling into her favorite armchair with a cup of tea that had grown cold during her lengthy recap of Sophia's perfect day. "Don't you dream of that, Kimberly? Don't you want what she has?" I stared at my phone, the screen still glowing with the last message Derek had sent me at 2:47 a.m. on his wedding night, barely 6 hours after he'd promised to love and cherish my sister until death parted them. The words burned in my memory like acid. "I married the wrong sister. We need to talk. I have an offer that will change both our lives." "Kimberly?" My mother's voice cut through my racing thoughts. "Are you even listening to me?" "Sorry, Mom. Just tired from all the wedding festivities." I forced my phone face down on the coffee table, as if hiding the screen could somehow erase the 17 messages Derek had sent me throughout his honeymoon suite. Messages that would shatter my mother's image of her perfect son-in-law and destroy Sophia's fairy tale beginning. My mother leaned forward, her eyes bright with the kind of maternal concern that always felt more like disappointment in disguise. "You're 32 years old, sweetheart. Sophia is only 28, and she's already married to a successful businessman who adores her. Don't you think it's time you started taking your love life more seriously?" The irony was suffocating. If only she knew that the successful businessman who supposedly adored Sophia had spent his wedding night texting me declarations of love and detailed plans for our future together. If only she knew that Derek's devotion to her golden child was apparently as fabricated as everything else about him. "I'm focused on my career right now," I replied, the same deflection I'd been using for years, whenever family gatherings devolved into discussions of my romantic failures. "The magazine is doing well, and I have responsibilities." Responsibilities. My mother waved her hand dismissively. "You run a small lifestyle magazine, Kimberly. It's hardly a career that requires complete devotion. Sophia manages to balance her interior design business with being a wife." The comparison stung, as it always did. Sophia's interior design business consisted mainly of redecorating her friends' vacation homes and charging them nominal fees for the privilege of her aesthetic opinions. My magazine employed 12 people and had won 3 industry awards in the past 2 years. But in my mother's eyes, success was measured solely by one's ability to secure and maintain a husband. "Derek seems like such a catch," she continued, oblivious to the way her words were twisting the knife in my chest. "Handsome, wealthy, devoted to family. The way he looks at Sophia, it reminds me of how your father used to look at me." I thought about Derek's actual expression during the wedding ceremony, polite attention rather than devotion, his eyes scanning the crowd even as he recited his vows. I thought about how those same eyes had found mine during the reception, holding my gaze with an intensity that had made my stomach churn with guilt and confusion. "He certainly seems to make Sophia happy," I managed to say, though the words felt like glass in my throat. "She's glowing, isn't she? I've never seen her so radiant." My mother's smile was pure maternal pride, and the way he treats her, bringing her flowers every week during their engagement, planning that elaborate proposal in Paris, insisting on the most expensive wedding venue. He clearly knows how to appreciate a woman of quality. I bit back the urge to tell her that Derek's appreciation of women apparently extended beyond his new wife. Instead, I picked up my phone, pretending to check emails while actually staring at his latest message. "I know this is crazy, but I can't stop thinking about our conversation at the rehearsal dinner. You understand me in ways Sophia never could. We could have everything, Kim. Everything." The rehearsal dinner conversation. The moment that had started this nightmare. Derek had cornered me by the bar, his hand lingering on my arm as he confessed that he'd been watching me for months, studying my work, admiring my independence and intelligence. He'd said things that made my heart race and my conscience scream in protest. Things that no man should say to his fiancée's sister 12 hours before his wedding. "I should go," I said abruptly, standing and grabbing my purse. "Early morning tomorrow." My mother looked hurt by my sudden departure, but I couldn't sit there another minute listening to her praise Derek's devotion while his messages burned holes in my phone. I needed space to think, to figure out what Derek really wanted, and what I was going to do about it. As I drove home through the quiet streets, my phone buzzed with another message. "I'll be back from the honeymoon Thursday. Meet me at the Meridian Hotel at 7 p.m. Room 1247. I have a proposition that will solve both our problems." Saturday's wedding had been everything my mother had dreamed of for her daughters. a fairy tale celebration that would be talked about for years. The Rosemont estate had been transformed into something from a luxury magazine, with cascading white orchids, crystal chandeliers suspended from silk-draped trees, and enough candles to illuminate a small city. Sophia had looked like a princess stepping out of a storybook, her custom Vera Wang gown flowing behind her like liquid moonlight. Her blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo that had taken 3 hours to perfect, adorned with vintage pearl combs that had belonged to our grandmother. She radiated the kind of ethereal beauty that made people stop mid-conversation just to stare. I had stood beside her as maid of honor, wearing the pale pink dress she had chosen for me, a color that washed out my darker complexion and made me look sallow in photographs. Not that it mattered. No one was looking at the maid of honor when the bride was Sophia Montgomery, the golden child who had been collecting admirers since childhood. "Isn't this perfect?" Sophia had whispered to me during the ceremony, her eyes sparkling with unshed tears of joy. "I feel like I'm living in a dream." The irony was that it was a dream, a carefully constructed fantasy that Derek had orchestrated with the precision of a military campaign. Every detail of their courtship had been calculated to appeal to Sophia's romantic sensibilities and our family's social aspirations. The surprise weekend in Napa Valley, where he'd spontaneously proposed. The engagement party at the country club, where he'd charmed every family friend and business associate. The wedding planning process, where he'd deferred to Sophia's every wish, while subtly steering decisions toward more expensive, more impressive options. I had watched it all unfold with growing unease, though I couldn't articulate exactly what bothered me about Derek's performance. He said all the right things, made all the right gestures, presented himself as the perfect prospective son-in-law. But there was something calculated about his charm, something hollow behind his smile when he thought no one was looking. The moment that had shattered my illusions had come during the rehearsal dinner, when Derek had approached me at the bar while Sophia was occupied with her bridesmaids. He'd positioned himself close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne, his voice low and intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. "You know, Kimberly, I've always admired your work at the magazine," he had said, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me a fresh glass of wine. "The article you wrote about women in business leadership. It was brilliant, sophisticated in ways that most people wouldn't understand." The compliment had caught me off guard. In a family that rarely acknowledged my professional achievements, Derek's recognition felt like unexpected validation. But the way he delivered it, with that intensity in his dark eyes and the subtle implication that I was more intelligent than my sister, had set off alarm bells in my mind. "Sophia has many wonderful qualities," he had continued, "but she doesn't share your depth, your understanding of complex issues. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be with someone who could truly match my intellectual ambition." I should have walked away then. I should have ended the conversation and told Derek that his comments were inappropriate. Instead, I had stood there, frozen by shock and something dangerously close to flattery. For the first time in my life, a man was choosing me over Sophia, even if that choice was coming at the worst possible moment. "Derek, you're getting married tomorrow," I had finally managed to say. "I know," he had replied, his hand finding my wrist and lingering there. "But that doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't change what I see when I look at you." The conversation had ended when Sophia appeared, radiant and trusting, wrapping her arms around Derek's waist and pressing a kiss to his cheek. "What are you two talking about?" she had asked, with the innocent curiosity of someone who had never been betrayed by the people she loved. "Just discussing Kimberly's impressive career," Derek had replied smoothly, his transformation back into devoted fiancé so seamless it was unsettling. "You're lucky to have such a talented sister." Now, 3 days later, Derek was texting me from his honeymoon suite while Sophia slept beside him, probably dreaming of their perfect future together. The messages had started during the reception, innocuous at first. Thank you texts for my maid of honor speech, compliments about how beautiful I looked in the wedding photos. But as the evening progressed and the alcohol flowed, they had become increasingly intimate, increasingly desperate. "I made a mistake," read one message sent at midnight. "I can't stop thinking about what could have been. You're the woman I should have chosen," read another at 1:30 a.m. And finally, the message that had kept me awake all night. "I married the wrong sister. We need to talk. I have an offer that will change both our lives." I stared at my reflection in my bathroom mirror, seeing the dark circles under my eyes and the guilty expression that seemed permanently etched on my face. 3 days ago, I had been the spinster sister, the career woman who couldn't find a man. Today, I was the woman whose brother-in-law was confessing his love while on his honeymoon. How had my life become this complicated? Derek Ashworth had entered our lives 18 months ago like a force of nature, successful, charming, and utterly devoted to sweeping Sophia off her feet with the kind of romantic gestures that made other women seethe with envy. Their first date had been a helicopter ride over the city, followed by dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in town. By their third date, he was sending her dozens of white roses with handwritten notes that made her swoon. From the beginning, I had felt like an observer watching a performance rather than witnessing genuine romance. Derek's gestures were too perfectly orchestrated, his timing too calculated, his responses to Sophia's reactions too measured. When she mentioned loving surprises, he showed up the next day with concert tickets to her favorite band. When she complained about her apartment being too small, he casually mentioned knowing a real estate agent who specialized in luxury condos. "He's too good to be true," I had confided to my best friend Rachel after watching Derek present Sophia with a tennis bracelet for their 2-month anniversary. "No one is that attentive to someone they barely know." "You're being cynical," Rachel had replied. "Maybe he's just a romantic who knows how to treat a woman right. God knows they're rare enough these days." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek was playing a role, hitting marks in some elaborate script that only he had read. The way he studied Sophia during conversations, cataloging her reactions and preferences like a researcher gathering data. The way his eyes would go cold and calculating when he thought no one was watching. The way he seemed to know exactly what to say to make our parents adore him, and what questions to ask to endear himself to our family friends. Most unsettling of all was the way he looked at me when Sophia wasn't around, with an intensity that made me feel like he was evaluating me for some purpose I couldn't understand. During family dinners, I would catch him watching me across the table, his gaze lingering on my face as I spoke about my work or my opinions on current events. When I would look back, he would smile and turn his attention back to Sophia, but the moment always left me feeling exposed and uncomfortable. The engagement announcement had come exactly 6 months into their relationship, timed to coincide with Sophia's birthday for maximum romantic impact. Derek had flown her to Paris for a long weekend, proposing in front of the Eiffel Tower with a ring that had cost more than I made in 6 months. The photos he posted on social media showed Sophia crying with joy, her hand extended to display the enormous diamond, while Derek gazed at her with perfect adoration. He must really love her to propose so quickly, my mother had gushed when they returned from Paris. And that ring, he clearly spares no expense when it comes to our Sophia. I had smiled and offered congratulations while privately wondering why someone would propose to a woman they'd known for only 6 months. In my experience, that kind of rush usually indicated either overwhelming passion or calculated opportunism. Watching Derek's measured responses to Sophia's emotional reactions, I suspected the latter. The engagement period had been a whirlwind of wedding planning, social events, and family gatherings where Derek played his role as devoted fiancé to perfection. He deferred to Sophia's preferences on every wedding detail, while subtly steering decisions toward more expensive options. He charmed our relatives at engagement parties and impressed our father's business associates with his knowledge of market trends and investment strategies. But there were moments when the mask slipped. During a family barbecue, I had caught him checking his phone while Sophia recounted a funny story about her day, his expression bored and distant until he realized I was watching. At a dinner party with Sophia's friends, he had made cutting remarks about her career that he disguised as affectionate teasing, undermining her confidence while appearing supportive. Most disturbing was the night he had shown up at my apartment unannounced, claiming he wanted to discuss plans for Sophia's surprise bachelorette party. He had stayed for 2 hours, drinking wine and talking about his business ventures with an intensity that seemed designed to impress me. When I mentioned that Sophia was probably wondering where he was, he had shrugged and said, "She's having dinner with her girlfriends. She won't even notice I'm gone." The casual dismissal of Sophia's feelings had chilled me, but I had convinced myself I was reading too much into an innocent comment. Derek loved Sophia. He was marrying her in 3 months. My suspicious nature was probably just a product of my own romantic disappointments and my protective instincts toward my sister. Now, staring at his messages on my phone, I realized my instincts had been correct. Derek Ashworth was not the man he pretended to be, and his marriage to Sophia was not the fairy tale romance everyone believed it to be. The question was, what did he really want? And what was I going to do about it? The full content of Derek's wedding night messages read like a manifesto of betrayal, each text more shocking than the last. I had screenshotted every one, unable to believe what I was reading even as the evidence accumulated on my phone like pieces of a puzzle that revealed a picture I didn't want to see. 11:47 p.m. Kim, I can't get our conversation out of my head. You looked beautiful tonight, but more than that, you look like someone who understands what I really need. 12:23 a.m. Sophia is everything our families wanted in a bride, but you're everything I want in a woman. There's a difference I didn't fully understand until tonight. 12:58 a.m. I know this is crazy timing, but I can't pretend anymore. Watching you during the ceremony, seeing how you handled the chaos of today with such grace and intelligence, I realized I made a terrible mistake. 1:15 a.m. You probably think I'm a monster for saying this on my wedding night, but I'd rather be honest than live a lie. I married the wrong sister, Kim. I see that now. 1:33 a.m. Remember what we talked about at the rehearsal dinner? About finding someone who truly understands your ambitions? I meant every word. You and I could build something real together. Something based on genuine connection rather than family expectations. 2:12 a.m. I know you feel it too. The way you looked at me during our conversation, the way you listened when I talked about my business goals, that's not how someone looks at their sister's fiancé unless there's something deeper happening. 2:31 a.m. I have a plan, Kim. A way we could be together without destroying anyone unnecessarily. Meet me Thursday when I get back. Let me explain what I'm thinking. 2:47 a.m. I married the wrong sister. We need to talk. I have an offer that will change both our lives. Reading them again in the harsh light of my kitchen at 6 a.m., I felt sick. Derek had spent his wedding night, the night he should have been celebrating his love for Sophia, crafting messages to seduce her sister. The calculated nature of it was almost worse than the betrayal itself. This wasn't a moment of drunken weakness or emotional confusion. This was deliberate manipulation. But what disturbed me most was the grain of truth in his words. I had felt something during our conversation at the rehearsal dinner, not romantic attraction, but the dangerous validation of being seen and appreciated by someone who usually overlooked me in favor of my sister. For 32 years, I had watched men choose Sophia over me, drawn to her beauty and charm while dismissing my intelligence and ambition as intimidating or unfeminine. Derek had been the first man to suggest that my qualities were assets rather than liabilities, that my independence and career focus made me more desirable rather than less. The compliment had been intoxicating precisely because it was so rare in my experience. I tried to imagine what would have happened if Derek had met me first, before Sophia. Would he have pursued me with the same calculated intensity? Would I have seen through his performance? Or would I have been as susceptible to his manipulation as my sister had been? The thought was deeply unsettling, because I wasn't certain of the answer. My romantic history was a series of relationships with men who either found me too ambitious or not exciting enough, who wanted me to be more like Sophia, softer, more accommodating, less focused on my career. The idea of being someone's first choice, someone's priority, was seductive enough that I understood how Derek's attention could be dangerous. My phone buzzed with a new message. I know you're awake, Kim. I can see that you're reading these. Please just think about what I said. Don't make any decisions until we talk. The fact that he could see when I read his messages made me feel exposed and manipulated. I realized he had been monitoring my responses, timing his follow-up texts based on my reading patterns. Even his middle-of-the-night confessions had been calculated to maximize their impact. I turned off my phone and threw it into a drawer, but I couldn't escape the questions his messages had raised. What did Derek really want from me? Was this genuine attraction? Or was I just another target in some larger scheme? And most importantly, what was I going to do with the knowledge that my sister's new husband was already planning their divorce? Sophia's happiness had always been the family's primary concern. She was the daughter who fulfilled our parents' dreams, who made the right choices and attracted the right kind of attention. My role had always been to support her success and accept my position as the backup plan, the spare sister who was valuable mainly for comparison purposes. But now I held information that could destroy Sophia's fairy tale beginning. I had evidence that Derek was not the devoted husband he appeared to be. that their marriage was built on deception and opportunism rather than love. The question was whether I had the courage to shatter my sister's illusions and my family's happiness for the sake of truth, or whether Derek's offer, whatever it was, might provide a solution that served everyone's interests, including my own. Growing up as Sophia's sister had been like living in the shadow of a star. Everything I did was measured against her effortless brilliance and found wanting. She was the daughter who never had to try, whose natural gifts attracted praise and opportunities that I could only achieve through grinding determination and exhausting effort. While Sophia breezed through school with B+ averages and still got into college on her charm and extracurricular activities, I studied obsessively to maintain my 4.0 GPA and graduated valedictorian to lukewarm family acknowledgement. When I started my magazine at 25, working 18-hour days and maxing out credit cards to keep it afloat, my mother's primary concern was whether the stress would make it harder for me to find a husband. "You're becoming too independent," she had warned me during one of our weekly lunches. "Men are intimidated by women who don't need them. Look at Sophia. She has a thriving design business, but she still makes time for relationships." The comparison stung because it was so unfair. Sophia's business was a hobby subsidized by our parents, while my magazine was a legitimate enterprise that employed 12 people and generated real revenue. But in my mother's value system, professional success without romantic achievement was just elaborate spinsterhood. The pattern had continued throughout our 20s. Sophia's relationships were celebrated as romantic adventures, each new boyfriend introduced to the family with enthusiasm and optimism. My relationships were analyzed for their marriage potential, each breakup treated as a failure that moved me further from my primary purpose as a woman. When Sophia dated the struggling artist for 2 years, it was seen as romantic and adventurous. When I dated a fellow entrepreneur who worked similar hours to mine, it was viewed as settling for someone who would never prioritize family over career. When Sophia's relationships ended because she got bored or found someone more exciting, it was just evidence of her high standards. When my relationships ended because of incompatibility or divergent life goals, it was proof that I was too picky and would end up alone. Derek's arrival had initially seemed like validation of our family's faith in Sophia's romantic destiny. He was everything our parents had wanted in a son-in-law: successful, sophisticated, and utterly devoted to their golden daughter. His courtship had been a masterclass in romantic gesture and family integration, designed to convince everyone that Sophia had finally found her perfect match. But I had noticed things others missed, partly because I spent so much time on the periphery of their relationship. The way Derek's attention to Sophia felt performative rather than passionate. The way he seemed more interested in impressing our parents than in actually connecting with his fiancée. The way his eyes would track to me during family gatherings, studying my reactions with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. During their engagement party, I had overheard Derek talking to our father about business opportunities and investment strategies, with a knowledge that seemed strangely detailed for someone who had only known our family for 6 months. He asked pointed questions about our father's company, about our family's financial portfolio, about our inheritance plans with the kind of casual curiosity that felt calculating rather than conversational. "Smart boy," our father had said to me later. "He understands the importance of financial planning and family legacy. Sophia's lucky to have found someone who thinks about the future." But I wondered if Derek's interest in our family's financial future was as altruistic as it appeared. Our father had built a successful construction company over 30 years, accumulating wealth and property that would eventually pass to Sophia and me. Derek's questions about inheritance and trust structures seemed unusually sophisticated for someone supposedly focused on romance rather than finance. The more I observed Derek's behavior, the more I suspected that his courtship of Sophia was part of a larger strategy that had little to do with love and everything to do with opportunity. Our family represented social status, financial security, and business connections that could advance his own ambitions. Sophia was not the love of his life. She was the key to a door he wanted to open. My mother's constant comparisons between Sophia's romantic success and my failures had trained me to accept my secondary status in the family hierarchy. I was the sensible daughter, the backup plan, the one who would probably end up taking care of aging parents while Sophia lived her charmed life with her perfect husband. But Derek's messages suggested a different dynamic, one where my intelligence and independence made me more desirable than Sophia's conventional beauty and charm. For the first time in my life, someone was suggesting that I was the sister worth choosing, that my qualities were assets rather than obstacles. The validation was intoxicating and dangerous. After 32 years of being the spare daughter, the prospect of being someone's first choice was almost irresistible, even if that someone was my sister's new husband. The messages continued throughout Derek and Sophia's honeymoon in Tuscany, arriving at odd hours that suggested Derek was sneaking away from my sister to text me while she slept or shopped, or explored the romantic countryside that should have been the backdrop for their new beginning. Tuesday. Sophia spent 3 hours shopping for ceramics today while I sat in cafes thinking about you. She doesn't understand that some experiences are wasted on people who can't appreciate their deeper significance. Wednesday. Had dinner at a Michelin-starred restaurant tonight. Sophia ordered chicken because she was afraid to try anything adventurous. I kept thinking how you would have appreciated the chef's creativity, how you would have understood what he was trying to achieve. Thursday morning. Flying home today. Sophia is already planning our next vacation, but all I can think about is our meeting tonight. Don't disappoint me, Kim. We have so much to discuss. Each message felt like a betrayal of my sister and a manipulation of my own insecurities. Derek was systematically contrasting my supposed sophistication with Sophia's perceived shallowness, painting himself as a misunderstood intellectual trapped in a marriage to someone who couldn't appreciate his complexity. But I recognized the technique from articles I had written about manipulative relationships. Derek was love-bombing me with attention and flattery, while simultaneously devaluing Sophia, creating a false binary where choosing him meant accepting that I was superior to my sister. It was textbook emotional manipulation, designed to make me feel special while isolating me from my family loyalty. The rational part of my mind understood exactly what Derek was doing. But the lonely part of my heart, the part that had spent 32 years being dismissed as too ambitious, too independent, too intimidating for most men, was susceptible to his calculated attention. I arrived at the Meridian Hotel at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes early because I needed time to compose myself in the lobby before facing whatever Derek had planned. The hotel was upscale but discreet, the kind of place where wealthy people conducted business that required privacy. Derek had chosen well for whatever proposition he intended to make. Room 1247 was on the top floor, accessible only by keycard elevator. When Derek opened the door, he looked like he had stepped out of a magazine, perfectly groomed despite his long flight, wearing an expensive suit that emphasized his tall frame and confident bearing. But there was something predatory in his smile that made me regret coming. Kimberly. He said my name like a caress, reaching out to touch my arm as he guided me into the suite. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. The suite was elegant and impersonal, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and furniture that suggested serious money rather than personal taste. Derek had ordered champagne and arranged a selection of gourmet appetizers that remained untouched on the coffee table. This seems like a lot of trouble for a conversation, I said, remaining standing despite his gesture toward the plush seating area. What I have to propose deserves proper setting, Derek replied, pouring champagne into crystal flutes. Besides, I wanted you to see that I can provide the kind of lifestyle you deserve, the kind of life Sophia takes for granted. I accepted the champagne but didn't drink it, studying Derek's face for clues about his real intentions. Up close, I could see the calculation behind his charm, the way he monitored my reactions, the way his expressions seemed slightly too perfect, like an actor hitting marks in a rehearsed performance. What exactly are you proposing? I asked directly. Derek's smile widened, and I saw a flash of something cold and satisfied in his eyes. I'm proposing that we stop pretending this marriage was anything more than a business arrangement. I'm proposing that we take what we want instead of settling for what other people expect us to want. What does that mean in practical terms? It means I divorce Sophia. Amicably, of course. With a generous settlement that ensures she's comfortable. It means you and I explore what could develop between two people who actually understand each other. And it means we combine our resources and ambitions to build something bigger than either of us could achieve alone. I stared at him, finally understanding the scope of his manipulation. You're talking about my family's money. I'm talking about leveraging assets that are currently underutilized, Derek corrected smoothly. Your father's construction company could expand exponentially with the right capital infusion and strategic partnerships. Your magazine could become a media empire with proper financial backing. Together we could build a business dynasty that would dwarf anything your family has achieved independently. The audacity of his proposal was breathtaking. Derek wasn't just suggesting an affair. He was outlining a complete takeover of my family's wealth and business interests, using me as his entry point and accomplice. "And Sophia?" I asked. Derek shrugged with casual indifference. "Sophia will be fine. She's beautiful and charming. She'll find another husband easily enough. Someone more suited to her limited ambitions." Derek's casual dismissal of Sophia triggered something protective and furious in me that cut through his manipulation like a blade through silk. I set down my untouched champagne and studied his face with the same analytical intensity I used when investigating sources for difficult articles. "Tell me about your business interests," I said, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "The investments and partnerships that would benefit from my family's resources." Derek's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone finally able to discuss his real passion. "I've been developing a portfolio of strategic acquisitions in the construction and real estate sectors, companies that are undervalued because their current ownership lacks the vision to maximize their potential. Companies like my father's. Your father has built something impressive, but he's old school, conservative. He doesn't understand how much wealth could be generated by leveraging his assets more aggressively." Derek moved closer, his voice taking on the intensity of a true believer. "With my financial expertise and your industry connections, we could expand his operation into commercial development, luxury residential projects, maybe even international markets." I nodded as if considering his proposal, while my mind raced through the implications. What would happen to my father's current employees? The people who've worked for him for decades? Derek waved dismissively. "Restructuring is always part of growth. Some positions become redundant, but that's the cost of progress. We'd retain the essential personnel and upgrade the rest." "And Sophia's role in this empire we're building?" "Sophia would receive a generous divorce settlement that ensures her comfort. She's not equipped for the kind of high-stakes business decisions we'd be making." Derek's smile turned predatory. "Besides, I've done my research on your family's inheritance structure. Your father's will splits everything equally between you and Sophia, but his trust arrangements give significant control to whichever daughter demonstrates the most business acumen." The blood in my veins turned to ice. "You've researched our inheritance?" "I'm a businessman, Kimberly. Due diligence is standard practice when considering any significant partnership." Derek's mask was slipping, revealing the calculating opportunist beneath the charming facade. "Your father respects your magazine's success, your financial independence, your ability to make difficult decisions without emotional interference. If you were married to someone who shared your ambitions, someone who could help you expand your business interests. You've been planning this since before you met Sophia." Derek's laugh was cold and satisfied. "I've been planning this since I learned about your family's assets 18 months ago. Your father's company was on my acquisition target list long before I knew he had daughters." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Derek hadn't fallen in love with Sophia, and then developed feelings for me. He had researched our family as a business opportunity, and chosen the most effective strategy for gaining access to our wealth. "Sophia was your original target?" "Sophia was the obvious choice initially. Beautiful, accommodating, easy to impress with romantic gestures. I calculated that marrying her would give me access to family resources while requiring minimal effort to maintain her satisfaction." Derek's clinical analysis of my sister was chilling in its detachment. "But spending time with your family revealed that you were the real prize. The daughter with actual business sense, the one your father trusts with important decisions. So you married Sophia as a placeholder while you planned to seduce me. I married Sophia to establish my position within your family structure. The marriage gives me legitimate access to family information, business discussions, financial planning sessions. But yes, the long-term strategy has always been to align myself with the daughter who could actually help me achieve my goals." I thought about Derek's behavior during the engagement period, his questions about our father's business, his interest in our inheritance plans, his careful cultivation of our parents' approval. None of it had been about love or even attraction. It had all been reconnaissance for a corporate takeover disguised as a romantic courtship. "What makes you think I would participate in destroying my sister's marriage and betraying my family's trust?" Derek moved closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Because you're tired of being the overlooked daughter. Because you've spent 32 years watching Sophia get everything handed to her, while you worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Because I can offer you something no one else ever has, the chance to be the chosen one instead of the spare." His words hit their target with surgical precision, exposing insecurities I thought I had conquered years ago. But instead of the validation I had craved, Derek's offer felt like poison designed to corrupt everything I had built through my own effort and integrity. "You're wrong about me," I said quietly. "And you're wrong about my family." Derek's confident expression faltered slightly. "Kimberly, don't let misplaced loyalty. I'm not talking about loyalty. I'm talking about love, something you clearly don't understand." Derek's expression shifted from confident seduction to cold calculation as he realized his carefully planned manipulation was failing. The charming mask he had worn for 18 months finally dropped completely, revealing the predator who had been stalking my family's wealth from the beginning. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice losing its intimate warmth and taking on the hard edge of a businessman whose deal was going south. "I'm offering you everything you've ever wanted: recognition, respect, financial power, and a partner who actually appreciates your intelligence. Don't throw that away for misplaced family loyalty. What I want is for you to stay away from my sister and my family." Derek laughed, a sound completely devoid of humor. "I'm afraid that's not an option. I've invested 18 months and considerable resources in establishing my position within your family. I'm not walking away empty-handed because you're having an attack of conscience." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. "What does that mean?" "It means I have legal rights as Sophia's husband. It means I now have access to family financial information, business discussions, and inheritance planning. It means I can influence your father's decisions and your sister's choices whether you cooperate with me or not." I realized with growing horror that Derek had trapped our entire family in his web of manipulation. By marrying Sophia, he had gained legitimate access to our business interests and financial information. Even if I exposed his true intentions, he could cause enormous damage from within our family structure. "But," Derek continued, his voice taking on a false reasonableness, "cooperation would be much more pleasant for everyone involved. Your sister could have a comfortable divorce and find someone who actually cares about her limited charms. Your parents could see their business empire expanded beyond their wildest dreams, and you could finally step out of Sophia's shadow and claim the recognition you deserve. What if I refuse?" Derek's smile turned predatory. "Then things become much more complicated. Divorce proceedings could drag on for years, tying up family assets and revealing uncomfortable details about your father's business practices. Sophia could face financial ruin if certain investment irregularities came to light during asset division. Your magazine could lose critical advertising contracts if key business relationships were strained." The sophistication of his threats was terrifying. Derek had clearly spent months studying our family's vulnerabilities, identifying pressure points he could exploit if necessary. He wasn't just a gold digger. He was a financial predator who had infiltrated our lives with military precision. "You're talking about blackmail. I'm talking about business consequences. Actions have results, Kimberly. The question is whether those results work for us or against us." My phone buzzed with a text message from Sophia. "Missing you. Derek and I are cooking dinner together tonight. I've never been so happy. Thank you for being such an amazing maid of honor. Love you." The innocent joy in her message, sent while her husband was threatening to destroy our family, made me feel physically sick. Sophia had no idea that her fairy tale marriage was actually a carefully orchestrated business acquisition, that her Prince Charming was planning to discard her as soon as he achieved his real objectives. "I need time to think," I said, desperate to escape Derek's suffocating presence and figure out how to protect my family from his machinations. "Of course," Derek replied, his charm switching back on like a light bulb. "This is a big decision. Take the weekend to consider everything I've said. But don't take too long. Certain opportunities have expiration dates." "What does that mean?" "It means your father is considering some major business decisions that would be much easier to influence from the inside than the outside. It means Sophia's trust in her marriage is currently intact, but that could change if certain information came to light. It means the window for a clean resolution is narrowing." I left the hotel suite feeling like I had been exposed to a toxic substance that was slowly poisoning my system. Derek had contaminated everything: my family's happiness, my sister's marriage, my own sense of security and trust. His manipulation was so comprehensive that I couldn't see a way to protect everyone I loved without sacrificing someone. If I exposed Derek's true intentions to Sophia, it would destroy her marriage and shatter her belief in her own judgment. If I told my parents about his threats, it could damage their business and their relationship with their son-in-law. If I cooperated with Derek's plan, I would become complicit in betraying the people who loved me most. But if I did nothing, Derek would continue his systematic destruction of our family from within, using his position as Sophia's husband to manipulate our business decisions and financial future. He had trapped us all in a web where every move seemed to lead to more damage. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with another message from Derek. "Sweet dreams, Kimberly. I hope you make the right choice." I spent Friday night pacing my apartment, weighing impossible choices while Derek's threats echoed in my mind like a poison designed to paralyze rational thought. Every option I considered led to devastating consequences for someone I loved. But by Saturday morning, I realized that Derek's greatest weapon was my fear of those consequences, and that my silence was the only thing keeping his manipulation viable. I called Sophia at 9 a.m. and asked her to meet me for coffee, claiming I had something important to discuss about family business. She arrived at our usual cafe, looking radiant with newlywed happiness, her skin glowing and her eyes bright with the kind of contentment that comes from believing your life is perfectly arranged. "You look terrible," she said, sliding into the booth across from me with characteristic directness. "Are you sick? You've seemed off since the wedding." "I need to tell you something about Derek," I said without preamble, unable to bear another moment of small talk while my sister's marriage crumbled around her. Sophia's expression shifted from concern to defensive wariness. "What about Derek?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots of his messages, watching her face change from confusion to disbelief to horror as she read his midnight confessions and calculated manipulations. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through evidence of her husband's betrayal, her breath coming in short gasps as the reality of his deception sank in. "This can't be real," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Some part of her had already recognized the truth in Derek's words, the calculated nature of his romantic gestures, the way his attention felt performative rather than passionate. "There's more," I said gently, and told her about my meeting with Derek, his threats against our family, his admission that he had researched us as business targets before he ever met her. Sophia listened in growing silence, her face pale and shocked as I revealed the scope of Derek's manipulation. When I finished, she sat staring at the coffee table for a long time, processing the destruction of everything she had believed about her marriage. "I was so stupid," she finally said, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was living in a fairy tale, but I was just a mark in a con game." "You weren't stupid. Derek is a professional manipulator who spent months studying our family to perfect his approach. He knew exactly what you wanted to hear and how to make himself irresistible to you." "But you saw through him," Sophia said, looking up at me with something like respect I had never seen in her eyes before. "You knew something was wrong from the beginning." "I suspected, but I didn't trust my instincts enough to speak up. I thought I was just being cynical because I was jealous of your happiness." Sophia laughed bitterly. "Jealous of my happiness. God, what a joke. I wasn't happy. I was intoxicated by the fantasy Derek created for me. The constant attention, the expensive gifts, the feeling that I was special enough to deserve that kind of devotion." We sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing the magnitude of Derek's deception and the damage he had already caused. Then Sophia's expression hardened with a determination I rarely saw in her. "What do we do now?" she asked. "How do we stop him?" "We tell Mom and Dad everything. We expose his threats and his plans before he can use his position in the family to cause more damage. He'll try to destroy us," Sophia said, fear creeping back into her voice. "You heard his threats about the business, about revealing financial irregularities. What if he can actually follow through? Then we face those consequences together as a family, but we don't let him continue manipulating us out of fear of what he might do." At 3 p.m. we gathered our parents in their living room and systematically revealed everything Derek had done. His calculated courtship, his threats, his admission that he had targeted our family as a business opportunity. I showed them the messages and played audio recordings from my phone, watching their faces cycle through shock, anger, and protective fury. "That manipulative bastard," our father said, his voice shaking with rage. "He played us all for fools." "We have to be smart about this," our mother said, her maternal instincts kicking into strategic mode. "If Derek is as dangerous as he claims to be, We need to protect ourselves legally and financially. By Sunday evening, we had retained a divorce attorney for Sophia, consulted with a criminal lawyer about Derek's threats, and arranged for an emergency review of our family's business and financial arrangements. Derek's carefully laid plans were about to encounter the full force of a united family who knew exactly who he was and what he was trying to do. On Monday morning, Sophia served Derek with divorce papers, while I delivered copies of his threatening messages to both our attorney and the police. His shocked expression when confronted with evidence of his own manipulations was almost worth 18 months of deception. Derek had underestimated the power of truth and the strength of family loyalty. He had also underestimated my sister's resilience and my own capacity for protecting the people I loved. His reign of manipulation was over. 6 months after Derek's carefully constructed world collapsed around him, I sat in my office reviewing the final legal documents that severed his connection to our family forever. The divorce had been swift and decisive once Sophia's attorney presented evidence of Derek's fraudulent courtship and threats against family interests. His attempts to claim marital assets had been dismissed when investigators uncovered his history of targeting wealthy families through strategic marriages. Derek Ashworth, it turned out, was not even his real name. He was actually Derek Morrison, a man with a pattern of seducing women for their financial connections and abandoning them when better opportunities arose. Our family had been his most ambitious target, but we had also been his downfall when his overconfidence led him to document his own manipulations in text messages. The investigation had revealed 2 previous marriages to wealthy women, both ending in bitter divorces when his true nature was exposed. The district attorney was considering fraud charges based on evidence that Derek had used false identities and fabricated business credentials to gain access to his victims. "He's pathetic, really," Sophia said, reading the police report over my shoulder. "To build your entire life around lying to people who trust you. I almost feel sorry for him." My sister had emerged from the devastation of her marriage with a strength and clarity that surprised everyone, including herself. The fairy tale princess who had been content to let others shape her destiny had transformed into a woman who understood her own worth and refused to accept anything less than genuine respect. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't found the courage to tell me the truth," she continued. "Derek would have spent years systematically destroying our family from the inside while I remained completely oblivious." "You would have figured it out eventually," I said. "You're stronger and smarter than Derek gave you credit for. Maybe. But I might have lost years to his manipulation, and Dad's business could have been destroyed by then." Sophia met my eyes with a directness that had been missing from our relationship for years. "You saved us all, Kim. You chose protecting the family over protecting yourself from uncomfortable consequences." The acknowledgement meant more to me than I could express. For 32 years, I had believed that my role in the family was to support Sophia's success while accepting my own secondary status. Derek's manipulation had revealed something I had never recognized, that my intelligence and judgment were valuable assets that had protected our family when charm and beauty couldn't. Our parents had also emerged from the experience with new perspectives on their daughter's relative strengths. My father now consulted me regularly about business decisions, recognizing that my analytical skills and skeptical nature provided balance to his more trusting instincts. My mother had stopped making comparisons between Sophia's romantic life and mine, finally understanding that marriage was not the ultimate measure of a woman's success. "I owe you an apology," my mother had said during one of our recent coffee meetings. "I spent so many years pushing you to be more like Sophia that I never appreciated who you actually were. Your independence and career focus aren't obstacles to happiness. They're sources of strength that protected our entire family." The magazine had also benefited from the crisis. My experience investigating Derek's background had inspired a series of articles about financial predators who target vulnerable families, earning national attention and several journalism awards. The magazine's circulation had increased by 40%, and I had been approached by major publishers about expanding our reach. Sophia had redirected her interior design business toward helping domestic violence survivors create safe and beautiful living spaces, channeling her aesthetic talents toward meaningful work that helped other women rebuild their lives. She was dating again, a kind, patient man who appreciated her newfound strength and independence, but approached relationships with a wisdom that Derek's betrayal had taught her. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Derek had met you first?" Sophia asked, organizing the legal documents into neat piles for filing. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but I think I would have seen through his performance eventually. He underestimated my willingness to prioritize substance over charm. He underestimated both of us, Sophia said. He thought I was too vain to recognize manipulation, and you were too lonely to resist flattery. He didn't understand that we actually love and protect each other. The crisis had revealed something important about our family dynamic that years of normal interaction had obscured. Beneath the surface competition and comparison, we were genuinely committed to each other's well-being. When Derek tried to divide us for his own purposes, that underlying loyalty had proved stronger than his sophisticated manipulation. As I walked home through the autumn evening, I thought about Derek's final message before his phone number was blocked. You could have had everything, Kimberly. Instead, you chose to remain trapped in your small life. But Derek had been wrong about what constituted everything. Real wealth wasn't money or status, or the validation of being chosen. It was the security of knowing that the people who loved you would fight for you when you needed protection. It was the satisfaction of work that mattered, and relationships built on truth rather than fantasy. I had chosen correctly, and I had never been happier.